Eben was a handsome and humble 18-year-old boy living in Lagos, Nigeria. Despite being born crippled, he had a cheerful spirit and a heart full of hope. His father, Mr. Tond, was the CEO of a large company, and his mother, Mrs. Sarah Tond, was a bank manager. They were wealthy and lived in a big house, but they were often too busy with work to spend time with Eben. Feeling that they were giving him the best opportunities, Eben's parents decided to send him to a prestigious boarding school, Savannah Boys and Girls College. They believed that the school, known for its academic excellence, would help him become independent. However, they didn't know that boarding school life would be far from easy for their son. Savannah Boys and Girls College was a diverse school, filled with children from both wealthy and poor backgrounds. The school claimed to promote unity and equality, but students often divided themselves into groups based on their social status. As a newcomer, Eben was quickly noticed, not for his charm or intelligence, but for his wheelchair. Many of the older boys saw his disability as a weakness, an easy target for their cruelty. From his first day, the bullying began. The seniors would mock him in the hallways, calling him names like crippled and worthless. They would knock his books off his lap and laugh when he struggled to pick them up. Every night, Eben would cry alone in his room, wondering why people hated him so much for something he couldn't control. His parents had no idea what he was going through, they were too caught up in their busy lives. Weeks passed, and the bullying only grew worse. One afternoon after class, a group of seniors surrounded Eben. "Look at you," one sneered, pushing his wheelchair. "You can't even stand up for yourself. You're pathetic." Another boy joined in, "Why did they even send you here? This school is for people who can actually walk." They continued taunting him, pushing his wheelchair back and forth like a toy. Eben's eyes filled with tears, but he was too scared to say anything. Suddenly, a voice cut through the air. "Leave him alone." It was a girl's voice, strong yet trembling. The group turned around to see Sarah standing there. Sarah was a scholarship student, known for her intelligence and kindness. However, the bullies also knew she was from a poor family, and they often picked on her for that reason. "You think you can tell us what to do?" one of the boys sneered at her. "You're just a poor scholarship girl. You're no better than him." They laughed, reminding Sarah of her own vulnerabilities. She felt her face flush with shame, but she refused to back down. "Just go away," she said, her voice breaking slightly. "Haven't you done enough?" The boys rolled their eyes and walked away, but not without taking one last jab at Eben. "You're lucky she's here, cripple. But this isn't over." They left Eben and Sarah alone in the hallway. Sarah turned to Eben, who was trying to wipe away his tears. "I'm so sorry," she said softly. "You don't deserve this." Eben looked up at her and managed a weak smile. "It's okay," he said. "Thank you for helping me. By the way, my mom's name is Sarah too. I guess that makes you my school mom now." Sarah chuckled, her own sadness momentarily lifted. "Well then, I guess I have to look out for you," she replied. "I'm Sarah, but you already know that." "And I'm Eben," he said. "Nice to meet you." From that day on, they became close friends. Sarah helped Eben get around the school and would sit with him during lunch when no one else would. She even helped him with his studies, pushing him to keep going despite everything. Eben started to feel a sense of hope, something he hadn't felt in a long time. He finally had someone who cared, someone who didn't see him as a burden. However, the bullies were not happy with this new friendship. They were furious that Sarah, a girl they considered beneath them, was defying their authority. One day, they decided to take their bullying to a new level. As they watched Eben heading to his classroom in his wheelchair, they set up a trap on the path, ropes and sticks carefully hidden to trip him up. Sarah noticed the trap from afar. Her heart pounded as she ran toward Eben, shouting, "Eben, stop." But it was too late. His wheelchair hit the ropes and tipped over. He fell to the ground, scraping his arms and face. The bullies stood nearby, laughing hysterically. Sarah reached him, her eyes filled with tears and rage. She helped him up, checking his wounds. "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice shaking. Eben nodded, though he was clearly in pain. "I'll be fine," he muttered. The bullies' laughter echoed in the air. "Look at the cripple and his poor friend," they taunted. "You're both pathetic." Sarah couldn't hold back her anger. "You're monsters," she screamed. "One day, you'll pay for this." The bullies exchanged glances, their smiles fading. They were used to getting away with their actions, but something in Sarah's eyes made them feel uneasy. They decided to walk away, but they weren't done. That night, they came up with a darker plan, one that would show everyone what happened when you crossed them. A few days later, the plan was set in motion. One evening, Sarah was in the study hall alone, catching up on her assignments. It was a quiet night, most students were in their dorms. The bullies knew this was their chance. They put on masks to hide their identities and crept into the study hall. Sarah was so focused on her books that she didn't hear them approach until it was too late. The four boys rushed at her, grabbing her arms and covering her mouth to muffle her screams. She fought back with all her strength, but they were too strong. They violated her in the most brutal way, tearing away her dignity and, eventually, her life. When they were done, they left her there, lifeless on the floor. They ran away, their masks still on, pretending as if nothing had happened. It wasn't until later that night that some students found Sarah's body. The sight was horrifying. Blood and bruises covered her lifeless form. They screamed for help, and soon the school was in chaos. Teachers and students rushed to the scene, and Sarah was quickly taken to the hospital. But it was too late. The doctors confirmed that she was dead. Eben was in his dorm when he heard the news. He felt like the ground had disappeared from under him. His only friend, the person who had stood by him when no one else would, was gone. He cried and cried until no more tears would come. He wanted justice for Sarah, but when the school authorities got involved, things took a dark turn. The school decided to keep the incident quiet. They didn't want to tarnish their reputation, and besides, Sarah was just a poor scholarship student. Her parents had no power, no voice to demand justice. The case was swept under the carpet, labeled an unfortunate accident. But Sarah's spirit refused to rest. Days turned into weeks, and the four boys began to experience terrifying events. At first, it was just nightmares, visions of Sarah staring at them, her eyes full of sorrow and accusation. Then the hauntings became more real. They would hear her voice calling their names in the middle of the night. They would see her standing at the end of the hallway, her face pale and tear-streaked. The boys started losing their minds. One of them was found screaming in his room, tearing at his hair. Another was caught trying to jump off the school building, shouting that he was being chased by Sarah's ghost. Their sanity crumbled as they were haunted by the girl they had destroyed. Eventually, they confessed everything. In their madness, they told the truth about what they had done to Sarah. The school could no longer ignore the situation. The boys were taken away, their lives ruined by their own actions. The truth about Sarah's death spread throughout the city, and people were outraged. Even though her parents were poor, the community rallied around them, demanding justice for their daughter. The boys were tried and found guilty, and the school's reputation was forever tarnished. In the midst of all this chaos, something miraculous happened. Eben was alone in his room one night, mourning Sarah as he did every night. He felt more broken than ever, wishing he could have done something to save her. Suddenly, the room grew cold, and a soft breeze brushed against his face. Eben looked up and gasped. Standing before him was Sarah, glowing softly in the dim light. She looked at him with the same kind eyes she always had, but there was a sense of peace about her now. "Eben," she said, her voice like a gentle whisper. "You have to keep living. Stand up, Eben." Eben felt warmth spread through his legs, a sensation he had never felt before. He hesitated, thinking it was a dream, but Sarah nodded encouragingly. Slowly, Eben moved his legs and, to his shock, stood up. He took a step, then another. Tears filled his eyes as he realized what was happening. "Sarah," he whispered, "thank you." Sarah smiled, her form beginning to fade. "You gave me hope when I needed it," she replied. "Now, it's time for you to leave. Goodbye, Eben." And with that, she was gone. But Eben felt her presence with him, felt the strength she had given him. He walked out of his room that night, shocking everyone who saw him. The boy who had spent his life in a wheelchair was now walking, each step a testament to the power of love and the strength of the human spirit. Eben left the school soon after. He knew he had to move on, but he would never forget Sarah, the girl who had given him hope, who had stood up for him when no one else would, and who had, in the end, given him the strength to stand on his own. The story of Eben and Sarah spread throughout Lagos, becoming a tale of tragedy, courage, and justice. It was told in whispers, shared in gatherings, and passed down as a reminder that sometimes, even in the darkest of times, love and justice find their way.